All right, so our next question we're going to tackle is when did the idea of a home group come about? Is the first portion of that question. Because I remember when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous in 1984, if they really emphasized anything about a home group, I miss that, and I missed that for a while. I don't know that either I didn't want a home group because maybe I had some loyalty to that treatment center that we talked about earlier, or I didn't want a home group. But when did that come about exactly?
Well, I don't think it was planned so much as it just emerged. That as we started coming together as a fellowship, we started just sort of finding our common denominator with people. We'd find people that were in tune, that we were in tune with, and they would tend to form into a group. There never was any real plan to have groups versus meetings and stuff. It was a developmental kind of a thing as we started to grow, and I think an awful lot of it came out of that 12th step approach, where because when you did a 12-step call on somebody, you had a partner for life unless somebody really screwed up big time, and so there'd be a fierce loyalty with that. And that would translate into a group, so that the people come together. Man, they were tight as ticks on a dog. They were really, really in there. And so there was it wasn't just a tenacious thing that mine's better than yours. It wasn't that. It was just a matter that people would find a place. And there was a quality of that togetherness in a region or a district. And it was very, very a normal thing to have a gathering of groups, and just kill a chicken or whatever, but there'd always be some kind of a thing. So there was a real strong sort of a connection, togetherness, and I think the 12-step, the approach to it, where one alcoholic reaches another, was a big factor in the development of that kind of ethic, and when, where we started to lose it was when this proliferation of meetings after treatment started being a real factor, and that people just started little meetings that were handy, and they started seeing the on the way home from work meetings. It's called a 5 o'clock meeting, lunch meeting. So you take your brown bag and you go eat lunch. Well, you don't get any real dynamic in that. That's just sort of me and what I need, and like a pit stop is what it is. And so we started to lose that strong quality of teamwork, of pulling together. That if you had trouble, buddy, you had friends. And so we got away from that.
So sometimes that might look like is me just stopping in to charge my batteries versus stopping in and trying to help a new guy find his batteries.
100%.
And just as a disclaimer, when you talk about killing a chicken, you're not talking about sacrifice. You're talking about eating. Right?
I'm not talking about eating.
Okay.
But not raw, but
we're gonna cook the dead
that's
chicken.
right. You're gonna kill that dude first.
Just making sure.
So I guess the way I'm understanding you, correct me if I'm wrong, is you're kind of saying that it wasn't like somebody got together and said let's make a home group. It just kind of evolved. The original groups kind of became the home groups, and then after the introduction of treatment, that's when the meeting kind of emerged. Yeah. So the home group came first, and then the meeting formed kind of afterwards.
That's right. And it did grow out of the 12-step thing, because that's where that bond of loyalty was generated, and it was powerful. It was truly powerful. And then when we started having meetings, they were just sort of casual drop-in things. And so the whole character of the program started to drift into different directions, But that was a powerful kind of a thing.
The other part of the question is what is a home group to you, and why is it important?
Well, I think with me, I try to keep it simple. Everybody's member is nobody's member. Is the way I look at it. I'm going to take some responsibility. I belong to primary purpose group, and my primary purpose in the primary purpose group is to help it be a strong group. And So the I think there's an important kind of loyalty that goes with a group that causes me to get away from just thinking about myself and having a purpose and really being able to help Alcoholics Anonymous get carried into to people wherever they might be. And so, yeah, I think home group is a critically important thing.
I think that is a good point, because I know for me, I appreciate being a member of a good, strong home group. And when I think about coming to my home group, I think about, I do try to be conscious of who's going to be there that's new, that maybe I can meet and greet, and what can I do to contribute, regardless of how tough my day might have been or how many people I had climbing on me for different things. That I've never really saw my group as a place where I come to necessarily get what I need, although I do. But I think it's one of those things that Bill Wilson had talked about, that any stability that I got in my life came out of learning how to give instead of demanding that I receive.
Yeah.
And that's my home group is where a place I can give, and in the process of that I get what I need.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that sense of belonging, I think, is awfully important. Just what I just said a minute ago. Everybody's member is nobody's member, and you're just sort of floating loose, and you're not going to do a heck of a lot if you're just sort of flitting from one thing to another,
So this is probably a a dumb question, and I didn't write it, but I am going to read it. Why is service work done at a home group?
Why is it done?
Why is service work done at a home group?
I guess versus just a meeting. Why did,
Just the same reason it's done in a detox. It's
listen, if you wanted the questions to be different, maybe you should have wrote some.
Well, I tell you, one of the reasons service is there, that your service is the secret. It's an old saying, service is the secret. If you want to look at the secret of what good, solid, enjoyable recovery about, service is the secret. If all you're doing is stowing it away and packing it in and all that, you will not be a happy camper. Yeah.
And I heard the analogy, and it was written probably 2,000 years ago, but I've heard you say it, Tom, as well, in talking about the Dead Sea.
Mm-hmm.
There's stuff that comes into that sea, but if it's nowhere to go, it gets stagnant. It's not very useful, and it certainly isn't going to sustain life. But versus the Sea of Galilee, that it's got a place where water comes in, but it also has a place where water goes out, and it's clean and pure and it's life giving. That's kind of a good example. I don't know. Maybe go out on a limb and say, could that be the difference between a meeting and a home group, or would the contrast
sure could
be that drastic?
I think it could. If you get a group of people and all they're doing is thinking about themselves, and not thinking beyond that, that's not going to be a vibrant, productive thing. It may be okay. I mean, it's good fellowship or something like that. But in terms of a useful purpose, carrying out our primary purpose, we won't touch it, And so to me, that's just what that home group and service is so important, because that's what the program's about. It's not about stuffing it in myself. It's about how can I pass this on to the next person. That's what it's about.
And I think that's a good concept, a good analogy, with the seas, because I know that I try to go to a lot of meetings just because I enjoy going to a lot of meetings. If I ain't doing nothing else, which I'm usually not, I try to go to a meeting. But I've noticed that with meetings, it was kind of instilled in me, to come early, leave late, help set up, help break down, and I try to do that at any place I go. But I've noticed that when it's a meeting, it's most people get there right before it starts. There usually is a lot of good stuff that goes on in the meeting. Once the meeting started, from the time we open to the time we close, there's a lot of good stuff that goes on. But once it closes, that's kind of it. It just dies and goes away. Versus, every time I come to my home group, it's not everybody, but there's a good solid group of people that, they come early and they leave late. There's a good fellowship before and after the meeting. And I never leave my home group and don't feel better than when I came in. And it's like y'all said earlier, you know, I don't come with the intent to get something out of it, but I always do.
So that's a good description too. That's a very good description.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, difference between a group and just a meeting. Yeah, light years apart.
Yeah, and the other thing is, how we're going to kind of go to how's the most effective way to lead a meeting, and I guess what we're referring to is a discussion meeting. How's the best way to lead a discussion meeting?
Have the leader lead instead of just turning it loose in a group. That I think. I mean, we don't have a training program for it, but I think a leader really has to lead the group. Otherwise, you just have a bull session. You know, you just have just and it may be harmless, but it probably won't be very effective. Yeah, and I think, and I don't think it's a matter of like being a drill sergeant. You know, just banging people around. But I know if I'm leading a meeting, you can bet that I'm thinking ahead. You know, as a rule, I'm thinking about 3 people ahead. I'm going to call on people. I'm not going to wait on them to speak up. I'm going to call on people. I'll usually stay 3 ahead so that I don't have to stop and say, but I'm going to know who I'm going to call. And personally, I will pick people according to how they're going to affect. You know, if I've got somebody that's a little sheepish and not quite comfortable with speaking up, I'll try to get somebody on in front of them that'll sort of warm it up a little bit, and then call on that person, and then they'll have a little bit more. I won't call on them just cold if they're real. So some people are scared to death sitting in a meeting. They don't want to get called on.
So if you're calling on people, and let's say, for instance, you know, you may not know everybody's name in the room. How do you know, those folks are going to get skipped over? How do you handle that?
I always just say, how about you? The good-looking guy with no hair, you know. But there's always a way to like
pointing at Mathew.
Yeah, but, or the pretty girl in the second row. Yeah.
And I've heard people make comments so that sometimes when people lead meetings like that they, you know, maybe call on their favorite ones, or, you know, call on older members, and some people get passed over or maybe not called on at all. Is there at any point does it make sense to open it up and say, you know, we're probably not going to get around to everybody. If somebody, you know, if you want to jump in and share, feel free to do it, and give them about 2 to 3 milliseconds to jump in.
Yeah, that I think that's a useful way. I think it's also good to establish a time frame. You know, that, you know, if you hold your remarks to no more than 2 minutes, then that way we'll have a chance to get around the room, and you know, give people an opportunity to join in. But to give some guidance in it, not just let it. If you just let a group of people start talking, that's going to be what it's going to sound like. It's a bunch of people just talking. But if you got a meeting where you got a topic and you're trying to get, I want to pick out people that, I'm going to start out with somebody who's pretty strong on it. I don't want somebody to say, now what was that about? Yes, but I think there's some strategies in leading a meeting. You know, and leading is the right word. You know, just chairing a meeting. I mean, anybody can just read the stuff and then pray. But I want to look for somebody that's going to lead and you know, to develop a good atmosphere for the meeting to occur.
Right.
You know, I've chaired meetings before and led discussions at different meetings, and been in a lot of different meetings where, you know, they don't really lead the meeting. It's just kind of, you know, here's what I've been thinking about today. You know, if you can get something out of that, take it and run. And that's really open ended, I think. And usually somebody will step in and give a more solid, if that kind of thing happens, a solid comment. But, you know, I've noticed in meetings, I led one recently that the meeting that I was at, they don't call on people, and I felt out of respect for the group that I didn't need to step on people's toes and do that, and didn't need to call on people. But there was it felt like an eternity smack dab in the center of the meeting that it was just nobody said anything. and it was the most awkward moment I've ever had in my entire life. And I'm sitting there wanting to call on somebody, but I'm like, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And is there an etiquette for that? You know, if that's the way that group's run, do I need to respect that while I'm there, or do I need to try to? Because I feel like I would be overstepping my bounds coming into their meeting, telling them how they need to run their meeting.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd respect it. I might tolerate it, but I tell you something I do individually. When I go in, once in a while, I don't do it on the purpose, but if I'm just happen to be traveling or something, I'll stop in on a meeting, no matter where it is. If it's one of those ring around the rosy things, you know, where you call in there, pass it on, or that kind of thing, I'll listen, and I'll pay attention, I'll listen. But if it gets to me, if it hasn't been a good solid AA meeting, there will be a sharp departure when it gets to me. And I'll start talking about what I want to be here at a meeting. And the fact is, I don't think that has ever offended anybody that I know of. And I've never seen it go back to what it was. And another name for that's leadership. Yeah, but it's just a matter, there's nothing nasty about it. It's just a matter, I'm not going to sit there in a bull session, you know. And you know, I'll put up with it, I'll be courteous. But when it get to me, we're going to go a different direction. Even if I'm by myself, we're going.
And it's been my experience too that if I'm leading a meeting like we're talking about, and we kind of covered that a little earlier, if crosstalk starts or someone that gets long-winded, if I'm leading that meeting, I feel like I've got a little more freedom to maybe ask that person to wrap it up and move on so we can get to some other folks but if I'm letting it just kind of freewheel, then I don't feel like I have that freedom, or it's a little more awkward to kind of jump in and try to pull it back.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that I've noticed, and it's kind of come up kind of recently for our group, is somebody bringing up the comment of opening the meeting up to if anybody's got a pressing issue. I've got an opinion on that.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on that?
Oh yeah.
I imagine you do.
Deliver me from that. Deliver me. No, that's a bull session. That's not a meeting. That's a bull session. That's all right. Out in the parking lot's okay for that. Yeah, but maybe somebody. I always think there's somebody in that meeting's in critical need of something about recovery, and I don't want to turn it into something. My cousin did this or whatever.
And maybe you can. I don't know if this is me just flying off the handle here too much, but. My kind of opinion on it is I feel like there's a tone in AA, and I haven't been around for that long, but I feel like there's an ideology that, the point of AA is kind of to have free therapy. You come to a meeting, you get some coffee, you spill your guts, and you go home and you're okay until the next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Versus this, the idea that if we work these steps, work this program of recovery, we'll get to a point where we've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body.
Mm-hmm.
Life isn't going to be this constant up and down roller coaster of just, the overwhelming desire to drink, binges, and back and forth. And I feel like it's, people talk about this networking thing, and I don't know, what is kind of your opinion on that? That's the way I've seen AA kind of. At some places, that's the way it's led to, and I don't feel like it's the program of recovery as much as it's let me just come and get as many numbers of guys as I can, and if I've got a problem, I can just spill my guts to them and be okay for a little while longer.
Yeah, that to me, that's not a group. That's just a meeting, and there's very rarely any organization to a meeting. Just that kind of a meeting where it's a casual. Number one, I avoid them first. That if I can, and. You can't dictate to people, what they're going to do. Just that example I gave, what I do if I'm in a meeting and it's one of the guys talking about what the bitch did. I guarantee you it changes when it gets to me. And I don't chastise anybody for that. I just say what I want to hear. And if I want to hear it, I guarantee there's some other people in there that want to hear it too. Yeah. And so that's what I do with it. I just I'm courteous about it. I don't think I've ever offended anybody. If I did, I never sensed it. And because I'm not offensive with it, I'm just saying what I want to hear. And most people came for something, but they get into that trivializing thing if easily. So I try to practice what I believe, whether I'm leading it. I was down at a meeting down at the Aberdeen building years ago, and the guy. Anyway, they were a little mixed up on the chairman, and the guy was sitting beside me. I knew he'd do okay, and he said, "Who's chairing the meeting?" I said, "You are, for God's sake. You don't know it?" He said, "My God, I didn't know that." I said, "Get up there." He did a good job, but he wanted a bit more set up to be chair. That wasn't a lie. That was, well. it was, I thought it was coaching, but yeah.